Welcome to this week's episode of the Evolve to Succeed podcast. My guest this week is Paul Meyer of Jade Aden Interiors. And as you'll hear during the course of the conversation, I've wanted Paul on this podcast for so long. He's had a very successful business journey, but one that has been dramatic in a number of ways. And I was really keen that he came on the podcast and shared some of the lessons that he's learned on his journey. So I hope you really do enjoy this episode. If you do, please remember to rate, review and subscribe, help us grow the audience for the podcast. And of course, thank you for your support and enjoy the episode. Welcome, Paul, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Much appreciate the invite, Ron. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for many years now. So I'm really excited to have you and have this conversation with you because I think your business journey is fascinating and I think it's going to be a great one to share with our listeners.
Thank you very much.
So your business journey actually started at a relatively young age, didn't it? With the kind of formation of Mayflower Interiors.
Oh, that was a long time.
How did you get, how old were you when you started the business and how did you get into sort of office and commercial interiors?
So, very quick update. When I started, I worked for my father. I had a very disjointed relationship with him. Didn't see him for a few years till I was 16. He reappeared. He had a business in Blandford. And he manufactured pumps. They employed about 60 or 70 people. He came back into my life when I was about 16. Said, do you want a job? So I didn't really know him. I hadn't really had any sort of father time with him. So I flunked all my exams, as you would. Trumped up, got nothing. Started working for him and hated every minute of it. Right. I did... we worked there since I was 16. I was the apprentice. I was the boss's boy. They put me head down the toilet. They tied me to the top of vans, electrocuted me.
Even though you were the boss's son.
They loved all that. It was just part of...
Banter.
Banter.
Was it called in those days?
That's the stuff. Now you'd be prosecuted. But I ended up in that business that I didn't want to be in. Yeah. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was pretty much feral as a child.
Okay.
Got in trouble with police a bit, driving and all sorts of nasty stuff.
Yeah.
And I decided that wasn't a journey I wanted to take. My mother was mortified. So she goes, oh, you just need to go and do something else. So one day, I had a bit of a row with father about doing some overtime or something. And I walked back from Blandford.
Right. And where were you living at the time?
I was living in Wimbledon. Okay. I was banned from driving at the time. So I walked back from Blandford. And during that walk of 10 miles, I thought to myself, that is the last time anybody's going to tell me what to do. Okay. Sadly. So I ended up back at home, never went back to work for father, bummed about doing a couple of jobs that I really didn't want to do, helping out on building sites, really, that wasn't for me. I'm a verbal act rather than a physical one.
Okay.
So I ended up getting a job at a magazine, selling advertising space in Wimborne for a really nice guy called Tony Fisher, who's probably dead and gone now. But I liked him, and he said, I've got a sales job going, and he was working with a solicitor in Wimborne who I sort of knew his sons. So he said, I'll give you a try. So I ended up being their field sales guy.
Okay.
Which involved going out dressed in a suit and selling something where you've got nothing to put on the table, advertising space. And it was hard work.
Right.
You'd canvass on the phone in the morning, then you'd go out and try and present appointments in the afternoon. So I did that for probably a couple of years. And
okay.
I quite liked that, and it was quite good money.
Yeah.
I was only 18, and I quite liked that. And then I bumped into a friend of mine who I'd been to school with, and he said, in a pub in Wimborne, and he said, I'm getting a sack tomorrow from a job in Poole, and I'm working selling office interiors and storage equipment. And he said, if you write in now, you might have a chance of getting a job. He said, it's a great job. You get a car.
Yeah.
And he said, it's, and you're working for a real high-profile guy. He's a real character. So I wrote in, and funnily enough, I had a phone call back the next day and said, you're never going to believe it, but we've got a vacancy coming up. So I ended up going for the interview and getting the job, and that was for a company called Nolan's.
Okay.
And he was, and I still to this day, I admire him. He was a character, Jim Nolan. He was chairman of Bourne Football Club.
I thought I'd recognise the name.
Oh, do you know, a real character. He probably doesn't like me a lot now because I obviously started a business following on from him, following on from his demise, really. But yeah, I'll put that out there. He's a nice guy. He was a character. He was from up north, and I developed a sales style from him. And this is in the days of what I'd call old school selling.
Yeah.
Whereas you had to do 20 cold calls a day. There was no internet. we traipsed around industrial estates in a car, and we did our best to get in front of people. And one of the little tricks he taught me was, you got in front of the receptionist. She said, "Who are you?" You said, "Oh, I'm here to see so-and-so," written on your call cards. She said, "Have you got an appointment?" You said, "Not today." And then when she got the guy on the phone, you took the phone out of her hand.
Right.
And then you started speaking to him, hoping that he'd think to himself, "Oh, he's quite innovative.
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll have a chat with him." So we did all of that. I did all of that for, God.
That's hard sales techniques, isn't it?
Well, you say that now, but that era of cold call selling is dead in the door.
Yeah.
And I used to get leads from a guy that did photocopies. He was a photocopier salesman, so I used to get some leads off him, and I used to swap stuff with him. Really interesting time. And it was the year of the yuppie. So everybody was wandering around with filer faxes.
I can only imagine what you look like, Paul.
To be honest, I probably looked a bit of a dick, to be honest. But I was 19.
Yeah.
Jim Nolan was super generous.
Yeah.
He said, if you did £1 million worth of sales in a year, he'd buy a BMW. Now, for a 19-year-old boy, I'm out selling then.
Yeah, that's it. I'm on it. I'm
on it.
See, I've got a target. I've got something to achieve.
And it was reward. So I got a BMW.
Yeah.
I really did think I was the king of it all, driving around as you would at 19.
Yeah.
And then one day we turned up at work, and I'd been there probably 2.5 years, and Court Gully were there, the receiver. And this is just literally on a Monday morning. Trumped up, they were there and said, "Oh, just to let you know, the business has gone into administration, and we're going to keep a handful of you just to see it out." And it was a big operation, very high profile, and that ended. So I didn't really know what to do. And my boss at the time, and I was 22 then, my boss at the time, sales director, said, "Look, I'm going to go on my own. Do you want to come with me?" I said, "Well, I sort of do, but I don't really want to work for anybody anymore because I don't know what I want to do."
At that point, you had two quite extreme experiences, hadn't you, with Nolan and with your dad? Neither had turned out quite as you'd probably envisaged or planned.
It sort of hadn't worked out very well. So he said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go 50-50 with you." Now, bearing in mind, he was 15 years older than me. So we ended up going to the business. Called it Mayflower Interiors because that's the road he lived in Southampton. And we moved to Southampton. So I was originally selling in this area in the West Country, and we moved the base to Southampton and started selling there. And that business ran for 25 years. I literally had a briefcase, and I was working at home. We got a little office, and it evolved. Kind of fun.
Yeah.
And he was older than me, and that I enjoyed that, and we grew it. We had 100 guys on. We were doing about £1 million a month in turnover, and then I realised that turnover's not the thing.
That's
Profit
a bit of
is.
vanity, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yes. And I ended up coming to that end of that journey with him.
Yeah. And what did those early days? Because there's a lot of people that listen to the podcast that perhaps thinking of starting a business, but you were still relatively young, really young to start a business. Can you remember what those early days were like and how it's kind of shaped who you are today, Paul?
Again, I remember going to see the bank manager for the first time when I was in my 20s, and we needed to borrow some money to buy some cars. Yeah. And this was in the really early days. And I remember sort of sat in front of him and saying, what do I need to say? Well, I don't want to lie, because that wouldn't be good, because you get caught. He's never going to lend us anything. And I ended up sort of plucking on his heartstrings a little bit by saying, "Look, just started, I need to borrow money to buy a car." And he's a really nice guy. Ron, his name was. He was from NatWest in Southampton. And that was a really, really good start for me. Yeah. And I realised I'd be really, really honest with people to get what I wanted. Because at the end of the day, unless you're honest, that it's the start.
It comes back, everything unravels quite quickly,
it's calmer. So that taught me a few things. And I'll tell you later on about my father, who obviously ended up in prison. So
okay, we'll come back to that.
But again, I went through 25 years with Mayflower. We had a great reputation. I got involved with some really, really good jobs. We did the BIC, Pool Arts Centre. We did a very high-profile guy's office, who I won't name, in London. I did that for a year. We were up there for a year doing that. Spent an enormous amount of time up there doing that. And we got involved with some really good people. Yeah. I met some really nice people.
Yeah. And should therefore just touch on that kind of darkest moments in that journey.
Again, late 13, I bought my partner out in 2010.
So this was the original partner that you were 50-50 with?
This is the original partner. Partners with him for 20 odd years.
Right.
Someone said to me many years ago, everybody always falls out about money. And he was witnessing my wedding.
Right.
He was like a second father. And I sat there one day and thought, I'm doing a lot of the work. He'd just come back from holiday. He did 8 weeks every summer. And I thought, no, Joe, maybe this just isn't fair. So I had a conversation with him to say, look, it's 2008, this was. We're coming into some really difficult times. Perhaps we just need to adjust the balance a little bit. We need to get at it. He didn't think that was the way he wanted to go. So over the next 2 years, we just worked out a way of him getting out of the business. We ended up falling out, which is sad.
It is sad, isn't it? When you're probably, like you say, you're probably looking for that father figure. It's one of the reasons the business worked. And then you end up in that place that you don't want to be with somebody because of business.
And I've always worked on the assumption that if you're not good at something, find someone that is. Now, I'm not, I openly admit, I'm not an HR man.
Yeah.
I'm a salesman. And salesmen sometimes don't make good businessmen. And I then worked out after he'd gone, and it was quite a long-winded journey when he went, and perhaps not the most pleasant, if I'm honest with you. But I then found someone to do the bits that I wasn't any good at.
Okay. And historically, was he doing those bits, or because you came both from a sales background, did you have two salespeople driving the business?
He was better at, I can't even say process and management. He was a good sales guy, but he wasn't very good at share of workload.
Right.
What he was good at was he liked to take his foot off the gas and step back and admire.
Yeah.
Whereas I quite like still shoveling coal
Go,
in the burner,
go.
which worked for many years. Yeah. But and again, I tell my nephews who are just starting off in our business, everybody always falls out about money, and it's a very, very sad thing. So if you take money out of your mind, it's easy. But so I just bought him out. We're coming around to 2014. I'd ridden out all the terrible 2008, 2009 years.
Because I suppose in the fit-out world, 2008, 2009 financial crisis, everything just gets pulled, doesn't it?
It's capital expenditure.
Yeah.
It's like someone to turn the phone off. I nearly rang BT to make sure it's still on. We had a pipeline of work during 2008, which is actually all right. Came into 2009 and it started getting a bit tight. I then worked my partner out of the business, bought him out, which made us a little bit more financially weaker, I suppose, if you look at it like that. And then 2010 onwards, it was actually okay. It started to get a bit better.
Up again, yeah.
But our business model was I had lots of relationships with main contractors, and we did lots of work. And contracting, being a subby, is the only business you can put an application for payment in, and then they just decide what they want to pay you and when.
Yeah, I was with a client talking about this. Acting as a sounding board the other day, and it comes to a point of desperation, isn't it? Particularly we were talking about final accounts.
Yeah.
And the fact that actually it's a lottery nearly at that point.
Well, the amount of times I've been sat in meetings, and don't get me wrong, I had relationships with people for 20 odd years. And you sit in a final account meeting and you've got a surveyor there saying to you, oh, we owe you 200 grand, but we don't want to give you that. It's a bit like a quiz show. We want to give you 150, but don't worry, we're going to get you on the next job. We're tight on this one. And that ethos where you weren't getting paid for everything you did, you sort of had to weigh it up. But I was then in a situation then we're turning over big numbers. I had a wage bill of 250,000 per fortnight.
Okay.
You always had to pay the guys.
Yeah.
So for me, food on table for guys, you're always paying the guys. So cash flow's king. You got a big business. And then we had 4 big jobs on with 4 main contractors. And I got pay less notices from 4 of them saying, we're coming to, and it was all textbook. You're coming to the end of the job, so they didn't need you anymore. Yeah. Oh, by the way, we dispute 8,000 hours a day work. And this is sort of like big numbers.
Yeah.
So I worked out, along with our MD, that we had a massive amount of shortfall of money, like £500,000.
Cash hole just emerges at that point.
It evaporated.
Yeah, okay.
So the perfect storm was brewing. So spoke to our accountant. He'd been my accountant for 30 years. He was a super, super nice guy. And he said, look, you got two choices. We need to go and see someone, because the penalties for trading while insolvent, as you know, Warren, are awful.
Yeah.
So went and got some advice off a really, really nice guy. And he sat me in a room and said, look, if you don't get the money for these jobs, then in theory, it's not nice. Yeah. You can go to court and we'll take them through a legal process, which is going to take a long time. It's going to be a long, arduous struggle. And I got sat in a room for about an hour. And after 25 years in business, I'm thinking, I've worked really hard for this. Do I want to start fighting? And then I asked them again, look, is there any other options? And there was CVAs and all sorts of things, which involved me going back to people and going, oh, I don't want to pay you all of it. I want to pay you a bit of it. And I felt then as bad as the main contractors. So, wrongly or rightly, I made the decision that I wanted to call it a day.
Right. And how does that, I can't ever imagine how that feels after all of those years, Paul, in business. And that having to make that decision.
Yeah, it's being emotional now. It's
obviously.
Open wound.
And so it should be. Really.
But again, I pick myself up, start again.
Was there a moment when you thought, I can't do it again? Because you at that point, and having seen people go through it, and I can see the emotion on your face now, and it's just a great sign of the man you are that 11 years later, it's still there. It's still hurting.
Carried it for a while.
And that's a sign of character, Paul. So
Thank you.
You've done that. You've built a business. You've created some wealth. You've brought out your partner. You're at this point where actually, probably the best years of your life should be in front of you.
Yeah, for sure.
And somebody's rips the carpet underneath you. Was there ever a point where you thought, no, I can't do this again?
I got super bitter and twisted, really, and tried not. I'm not a grabby, greedy person. I'd like to think I'm very mellow. And my wife, God bless her, I sat there one morning and I actually had 5 minutes of starting to feel sorry for myself. Right. And I'm just sat there at the kitchen table and she said, "You want to stop that?" I said, "Oh." She said to me, "You just want to stop feeling sorry for yourself. It's pathetic."
Yeah.
And never felt sorry for myself after that, really. and that it took that, and it really did throw me into another. Say, right, okay, I've done it once.
Yeah. And
my business partner now, who just happens to be my wife's cousin, he came and saw me the day it all happened and said, "Look, come work with me for a bit," and I'll never forget that.
Right. So there's a friend, somebody that just put an arm out and just
somebody put an arm around me. And again, I'll be honest with you, I think I said to you earlier on, I've got 3,500 numbers in my phone book.
Yeah.
And there's still people now that treat me differently, and I've never affected them. I never took them for any money.
Yeah.
They still are different with me now because of the stigma of going bust.
It's wrong though. That stigma shouldn't exist. I mean, there is people out there, isn't there? And
they were doing it for a living.
Who are doing it for a living, and they're taking people and they just repeat, rinse, repeat. It's how they make their wealth and their money, and it's completely immoral and wrong. But in this country, when you've got a great business and you're doing well and you're profitable, but something, we could all be at that point where something comes from left field.
Yeah, of course.
That disrupts and disturbs,
and
that people still hold it against you, Paul.
They do, and that is, I think, something to do with British culture.
Yeah.
No one likes to see anybody doing well. I've always been a lover of nice cars.
Yeah.
And I was taught from a very early age that not everybody you're dealing with likes you to have a nice car. And that, again, I think is a British thing.
Yeah.
In America, you'd be seen as, if you've got a nice car, you're doing well, and people are happy for you. Yeah. And I'm just citing America. It could be anywhere, but British culture says no.
But there's a different attitude to America to taking risk and risk reward, isn't there, that we don't have in this.
Yeah, no, exactly, and I agree with that entirely. And I think what summed it up for me, the day after this all happened, I was ringing around customers, because that's the only asset I had left was customers. And one of the main contractors, who owed us about 150 grand, rang me up and said to me, "Paul, how are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm okay, thank you." And I'm thinking, this is actually quite a pleasant phone call. He said, "Look, if I can do anything for you, please just give me a ring." He said, "We've got quite a lot of work going forward if you want to come back into it." And I said, I'm thinking to myself, do you know, I think, and this is the CEO. And I'm thinking, do you know what? That's really nice of you, thank you. And he said, oh, just before I let you go, obviously we had an outstanding debt with Mayflower. It would be any chance of you signing a final account agreement? And backed up, I won't name it.
No,
I name the guy, but would you any chance of you backdating a final account agreement? I said, well, that's very nice of you to say that, but I won't be ever dealing with you again. I'll put the phone down, never spoken to him since. Wow. And
morals, integrity, and truth.
Exactly. Yeah. And my moral compass said to me, never deal with him again, and I would never deal with him again.
And when you got, which is now Jade Aden Interiors, up and running and off the ground, how did those early days feel like in contrast to those very early days of Mayflower?
I was really, really lucky that I had a core of customers who I'd known for a long time, and who invented jobs for me to do. So I was really, really, and I still feel humbled now that people rang me up and said, oh, we need someone to do it in the office. And you go in the office and they want you to replace something that I don't think needed replacing. They were making work. And I had quite a few of those, and I was humbled. Yeah. And then I had quite a few bits and pieces from there on. We were obviously tied in with a bigger company then, and Graham, my business partner, was doing the external parts. And he said, look, this is a marriage, really. Yeah. You can come on and do the internal parts. And it sort of evolved for them. So we blended my old customer base with some customers that he had that weren't doing interiors that we obviously did. Graham and I already had a business doing property. Okay. Which was...
So there wasn't a risk. I mean, we said earlier about people fall out about money, but families can fall out over business.
Correct. And as with my father, I sort of knew that full well. So I've always, tried to play a straight bat. But if you always do what you say you're going to do, even if it costs you money, generally you won't go far wrong. Yeah. And if you really say how it is and you're honest, and I don't think you're ever going to fall out with anybody.
No, and I know Graham. Graham is a great guy, isn't he? And
he's a lovely fella.
He's got that strong moral compass as well, hasn't he?
Strong moral background. And I'm a handshake man. Yeah. And that's what, unfortunately, was the demise of my previous business. I trusted too many people, shook their hand, and did things that I never got paid for.
So what have you done differently in business second time round?
And I knew you'd ask me that question. So I've kept it smaller. Yeah. For me, we drifted out from completely doing interiors. We're doing about £6 million worth of interiors now, so sort of half the turnover. But I got more into property. Okay. So we got into building a rental portfolio of commercial property. Okay. So we've teed that into the business, and that gives me what I think for later on in life, passive income. Yeah. I think that's important, and I speak to lots of younger guys now that are all trying to get into property because of that passive income side of it.
Definitely.
And I had always been doing property, but I'd never been that heavily into it. Okay. We've now got a lot more heavily into it. And we've done a number of design and builds. We built an 84-bed Premier Inn hotel a few years ago. Over in Ringwood, we developed 13 acres over there. So for the past 6 or 7 years, I've got more heavily involved with that.
Okay, so you've diversified to take some of the risk away, as it were.
Yeah, and whereas beforehand that was a hobby, now it's probably 50-50 of what we do is 50% development, 50% commercial interiors.
We didn't know that.
Did you not know that
one? No, I knew there was a property portfolio in the background, but I thought I suppose it is. That's part of the retirement plan, isn't it? That's passive income. That
sort of part of the retirement plan.
Give yourself some life choice, really, isn't it?
And again, with everyday business, in our business, you have to keep the fire burning, and you've constantly got to be finding work to replace the work you're finishing. Yeah. And again, that comes with a decent reputation. And for me, reputation is everything. Yeah. And when you sit down and think about it, we're in a service industry with capital expenditure. Once a person's done their office once, unless you're really lucky, it's not going to happen for another 10, 15 years. No. So it's a constant process of just reinventing either new customers or just keep feeding the train.
Okay. And what advice would you give to somebody that's maybe listening to this podcast? Because times are quite challenging again at the moment. So listening to this podcast and just concerned and worried that they're getting themselves into those kind of financially challenging times.
I took advice as soon as I thought I was heading trouble's way. I didn't. And again, it's easy to put your head in the sand. And don't get me wrong, I would have desperately loved to just shut my eyes and hoped it all went away. But if you get hold of the problem and speak to someone that you can get some advice from. And again, over these last 11 years since all that's happened, I've had quite a few people ring me and say, look, I'm not going to get paid for this. What do you think I ought to do? I said, well, you need to go and see someone and talk to them about it. And again, I think I said earlier on, if you're not good at something, and no one's good at trauma, when the tsunami comes of that financial trauma, you need a level head to look at it.
Yeah.
And that comes from outside, I think.
That comes from that sounding board, that advisor, somebody that can just put a different perspective on it.
Yes, and probably talk some sanity into it, because your head becomes a tumble dryer of what's happening, and sometimes you can't really think straight, and maybe you make the wrong decisions.
You separate. I suppose it's really hard when you're in business, and we all have those circumstances, don't we? Maybe not as severe and dramatic as that, where business isn't a smooth ride. It is that kind of roller coaster, as people call it. And when you're in that low, it's quite hard to get perspective at times, isn't it? Because you are so passionate about what you are and what you do in your business.
For sure, and more of it for me was losing reputation and losing face with people. And I've always tried to be honest and honourable. And someone, again, really, really bright, said to me many years ago, it's nice to be important, but it's even more important to be nice.
Right.
And and I live with that.
Yeah.
So if I can ever do anything for anybody, I always will. People phone me for really odd things.
Yeah. That
is just a phone call for me to make, but it makes a big difference to them. So, and I'm more than happy to help anybody, but there's lots of people, millions of people in this world who are what I call greedy and grabby.
Yeah, just in it for themselves.
Sadly.
A very quick break from this week's episode, which I hope you're enjoying. If you are enjoying, please remember, do help us and help yourself to make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing and reviewing the episode. So that's it. Short interlude from me. Let's get back to the conversation. And we've talked about some of the darkest moments. So I want to change it. I want to go a bit more upbeat, Paul, and then think about what are some of the things you're most proud about from your time in business to date?
Super proud. We started a ski chalet business in 2018. Completely bizarre how it happened. Ended up, we've always been skiers. We had a home in Switzerland for many years. And my daughter went and did a couple of seasons in Three Valleys. She went, this ski chalet business is brilliant, Dad. I said, well, what a great idea. Sadly, I ended up going on a little bit of a road trip from Switzerland one summer with my wife, and we bought a ski chalet in Morsey, a new one that was being built, purely and solely just to run a ski chalet. So we started Chalet Heavenly.
Right.
Which was a real odd journey because I'd never been involved in hospitality, and I just thought, that'd be quite easy. Little did we know it wasn't. But yeah, my daughter's husband's a chef. She was a host, knew the business. So we spent 5 years developing that. We did lots of celebrities. I did Pixie Lot's Hen Do.
Okay.
We did lots of really interesting guests. I was commuting back and forward to Geneva twice a week for 19 weeks of the season, and basically became a skivvy and a car cleaner, which was very humbling and brought me down to earth, Warren.
Yeah. It gives you a different perspective, doesn't it?
It gives you a different perspective, but it made me realise how difficult things are to start from scratch.
Yeah.
I'd never built a brand before, and I didn't realise how difficult that was. I enlisted the help. A good friend of mine's got a digital media business, and he helped. I didn't really understand the connotations of building that brand. Instagram, don't understand any of that. I'm not a social media man.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise how important all of that was.
Yeah.
But again, we got to the 5-year journey this time last year, and we've literally just sold that business.
Okay.
And hey, am I sad that I sold the business? Probably.
Yeah, because it doesn't, from our conversations over the years and your journey with Mayflower and now Jade Aden, I don't see you as a person that wants to build a business for exit. So it has been a different journey for you.
I just had a funny 5 minutes. I'd had many years of skiing and thought I tried to turn a hobby into a business. And I understand lots of people do that. But again, it was great fun. We had some great clients. We had some really, really good times.
Yeah.
But again, I think with global warming, sad to say,
Yeah.
I think the snow level now is. Last season there was two dumps of snow in Morsine all year, and I think that's going to become more prevalent.
Yeah.
So again, we were lucky enough to.
Yeah. And was your daughter involved for the full 5 years in that business with you?
She was.
And how did it feel? I'm going to turn the tables. Obviously, you had that poor experience with your father. How did it feel being in business with your daughter?
And my wife.
Yes.
So again, I tried to be submissive. What I did was sit in the background. I wasn't really front of house. I did a ski safari with the clients on a Friday.
Okay.
And ended up taking them into the Folly Deuce to get them drunk, and that was my task.
I assume you did that very well, Paul.
I don't know whether like that, but yeah, I just tried to step back because again, everybody falls out about money, even within families.
Yeah.
And I tried to not make anything about the money. I just tried to make it for the experience for them.
Yeah, brilliant, definitely. And how have you changed as a leader over this kind of crumbs? I'm going to say 30. I'm going to age you now, probably, which is a bit scary. Probably 34 years or 35 years in business.
35 years in business. So my nephew's now coming into the business.
Okay.
They're a lot younger, obviously. They're in their early 30s. I haven't got too many decent leadership skills, and it's difficult when you're a salesman to be a poacher and a gamekeeper with being a leader and being pessimistic sometimes and having to be pessimistic. Whereas being a salesman, you're very optimistic.
The glass is always full, not even half full.
And I'm a big half full man.
Yeah.
But again, going forward, I think business now is so much different to when I started with technology. I mean, podcasts.
Yeah.
I mean, you're lucky. Mobile phones were just coming out when I started, but now we're into a digital age. We're into social media. We're into the internet. And now the sad thing about all of this, I think communicating between people and business is now sort of dying with Teams calls and social media. So again, I think with new people starting in business, there's a lot more opportunity now with things that younger people see on social media to say, oh, it's easy to start a business, or just be an influencer, or just sit at home and post things. If they're interested, we'll get paid for it. I think you get out what you put in.
Definitely.
And I think if you keep putting in, you'll eventually get out.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed in any year.
Okay, that hasn't. And again, so, where do you see Jade Aden Interiors? You brought sort of your nephews into the business. Where do you see that business going now?
I see me taking a slightly back seat.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm a bit more now involved with the property side of things. We've got some really, really great clients and some great things maybe happening going forward with that. That is a little bit more, I'd call, older lifestyle for me.
Yeah.
You need youth and you need enthusiasm for businesses to keep them charged.
Yeah, definitely. It's this rejuvenation, isn't it? And it's how do you pass a business through generations? Difficult. So many people perhaps hold on to the reins for far too long and don't allow that energy to come through.
You need to hand the baton over.
Yeah.
And again, with all of these things, I'm a dinosaur. And again, with my ethos and ethics going forward, that's all going to evolve into something different. And I don't want to impede that journey for them. So sometimes you've got to wave your hands, say bye-bye. I've still got some great customers I'm dealing with 35 years later, and I genuinely enjoy their company.
Yeah.
But again, there needs to be a change of guard.
Yeah, yeah. And your role, therefore, is a lot more in terms of mentoring and coaching.
And I'm no mentor, Warren. I can't look after myself. But no, again, I'm there for guidance. What I have got is I've got experience in the industry, bad and good. Someone said it's always going to be a bed of roses. Unfortunately, there's manure on some of it.
Yeah.
And with all types of business, there is these pitfalls that you've fallen down before, and you wouldn't know they were there unless you've been in them.
You can wave the flag and say,
wave the flag.
Yeah.
And again, I think the only thing that I can offer them is advice from where I've gone wrong, and I have gone wrong.
Yeah.
But it's just how you bounce back.
We all, yeah.
Everybody has, yeah.
You don't get it right all the time.
You never get it right all the time.
Got to be resilience. And where do you think your resilience comes from as a personality and as an individual?
Again, that's a really good question. Again, as I said to you before, that day that I started feeling sorry for myself, I realised that wasn't me as a person. I'm a survivor. And again, I don't like greedy, grabby. I'm a much better taker or giver of goods rather than I'm a receiver. I hate receiving presents. I'm a much better person giving them. I feel embarrassed taking things. So I quite quickly realised that you're never going to get anything in life unless you work for and strive for it yourself. And that's what drives me on. You need to be a provider. I've provided for my family. I've provided for my own ego, if you like. An ego's a horrible word, but everybody has an ego.
But how do you balance? Because I've known you. I must have known you for over 20 years, Paul, which starts to age me as well.
Warren, that's the thing.
Which probably ages me as well. And it's that strong personality, that smile on your face, that little bit of kind of ego that does creep in every now and again. How do you keep that under control? Because ego can be the worst thing in
when
business.
Ego overtakes ability, you then become an undesirable product, in my opinion. And don't get me wrong, everybody has got an ego. And so I try to suppress that because it's a horrible emotion. I always try and be humble. I'm involved in a charity club with a few guys called the BC. And we are 40 guys that just go out for lunch every 3 months. And we raise money. And we give that money to local charities, most of them children. And you realise how humble things are. We collect every year for school children or kids locally who haven't got a warm coat to wear to school. So we donate and buy 200-300 coats. And you realise where there's children that haven't got the basics, a coat to wear to school. That keeps your ego under control.
It does. It just grounds you again, doesn't it?
Grounds everything and humbles you up. And everybody needs that, I think. But easy to get out of control. And again, I think, unfortunately, money's a terrible thing to breed egos.
But the sales guy in you is driven by finance and money. And reward.
Very true. Very
true. Security, I assume.
Reward and security, again, as you get older, security becomes more. When you're younger, reward is more. And all you want is
the shiny things, aren't you? And we've all been there again. The shiny things are great, aren't they?
Have you been there, Ron, with shiny things?
Yeah.
I have. And again, I see these young guys online posting things about how successful they are and what they've got. And I find that crass. Hey, don't get me wrong, it's nice to have nice things, but it is quite crass. And it's like rubbing people's noses in it and social bullying, I suppose.
It is, isn't it? It's look at me, you could be like me, buy my course type thing. And there is no substance to the underlying business or individual or...
Exactly. There's no... trend. If you kick the front door and the whole house will fall down because there is no substance there. But again, I'm a dinosaur. I'm drifting away.
I remember you talked about a good piece of advice that you received. One of the best pieces advice that I ever received was from somebody that you and I know well, and they just said, remember, there's a lot of people coming in and out of sort of business in the town and stuff, and they remember you're going to be around for a long time. This is your home. And he said, proper people do proper business in a proper way.
And I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it kind of like resonated with me. It was very early on in my inspired journey, and it's still there. And a lump in my throat comes when I think about it now. And that's always stayed with me as a principle of, okay, that's how we should do business.
We're in a microclimate here. And Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch is really, really key that you have a moral standing. You've got a good moral compass because it's such a small...
But that's the same whatever business. Even if you've got a national business, you've got that community, haven't you, that you serve. And wherever you are in the country, you've got to behave in the right way.
Got to behave in the right way, and unfortunately one wrong incident will stay with you for life. And I've told you 3,500 people on the phone, there's still a handful of them that still remember the 11-year-old journey. They weren't affected by it at all, but there's a stigma attached to it. And a terrible stigma.
Strange, isn't it? And I just want to touch briefly on interior design and offices, because we've got to tap into your expertise here now, Paul. How have you seen that? Well, post-pandemic, there's this kind of work from home, work in the office. What does a working office commercial environment need to look like? How's that changed? And what are perhaps some of the latest trends that we're seeing?
The latest trends. So how we found it change after the pandemic was everybody'd been used to working at home. So they've come from working at home and then they've gone, we've got to go back to a drab, horrible office with poor breakout kitchen facilities and there's no telly. So what we found, and it really did become prevalent, was people started having to make their office look a bit more homely and look a bit more what I'd call upmarket to A, attract staff, and B, to get people back to work.
Actually get them in and it'd be a great place for them to be.
We're not going back there, it's drowdy and whatever else. So we've seen that, and there's a lot more design input now into offices. And again, we're doing 3D. So whereas we used to trump up with a little quote and say, look, it's going to look like this, you've got nothing to put on the table apart from a sort of 2D
schematic
plan.
Of kind of where the desks are going to be.
It's a little drawing. Now, we've had to invest in 3D walkthroughs. We've had to invest in really intricate drawing equipment to make these things, because people haven't really got a lot of foresight on what it's going to look like. So that sort of things is evolving perhaps for the better, I think. But again, we're shifting into people want to make much better environment to work in rather than before, and they just make do.
And you're seeing that people make that investment and commit, and rather than being nervous that maybe this kind of work from home piece will grow as a trend. And you're probably a good person to ask. Are you seeing that trend reverse in your client base?
1,000,000%.
Okay.
So now a lot of people, and I think I'm probably not talking out of turn, JP Morgan, I think, have said everybody's got to come out to work. And I think a lot of people now are saying, well, working from home doesn't work for a team. So you can't work as part of a team.
Day one, but
never going to work. But again, with all of that, I think it will go full circle. And I think you'll find people back at work more than they were before pandemic.
It's interesting, isn't it? Today, funny enough, every now and again, as I go over the flyover towards the Dolphin Centre, I look left at the car park at the railway station. Clearly, 2020, 21, it was dead. Nobody parked there. 22, 23, it's getting busy. Now, looked over the bridge as I came over in my car today, and that car park is rammed again. It's a Wednesday, we're recording, and it's clearly everybody going to London again.
And that, again, I see, the only thing I do see now is that some people don't work Fridays. I see the roads really quiet on a Friday. If I come in and out of London on a Friday, we still do some work up there. The road on a Friday is really quiet. Monday sometimes is quiet. Tuesday's really busy. Thursday's really busy. So I think that will change. Where I think people are doing 4-day weekends.
And we all, and maybe that's the happy medium where we should be. Maybe. And then I need to just go back, because we said to the listeners we would, and we've gone upbeat, but I'm going to turn back because there was the story of your father that we didn't finish. Do you mind sharing it, and what lessons you may be taking from that?
Major lessons from that. So my father had an engineering business. We didn't speak for many years after I left. And he was quite successful. He's a character, my father. He's well known around Blandford. He was a character. He ended up selling the business and obviously getting some money. He then got into a business he didn't really know too much about. He was just financially backing it. And he got involved with selling software, which he knew nothing about. He was a man of late 60s.
Okay. And
the technology era was just coming out and they were selling software. He got mixed up with some people that weren't selling 100% legitimate software, which they call grey market, which Microsoft didn't really like. That was a big thing then. So when you got your disk from Microsoft, they put it in the computer and loaded it on, and obviously there was a price point for that. So he ended up getting involved with these guys. He was, he didn't know anything about computer software or anything else. He was just the sort of money behind it. And he did that for a few years. And then one afternoon he got a knock at the door, and it was police. And they raided his house, and they tried to paint him out as being a big-time counterfeit software guy, which he wasn't. He was just just got involved with the wrong people at the wrong time. He ended up going through a huge legal battle where they put a worldwide freezing order on all his assets. Myself and my sister were interviewed. We obviously had nothing to do with the business. I didn't really have too much to do with them any at the time. We were interviewed, which was a harrowing time because I didn't know anything about it, and all of my sister.
This was probably the first you were learning about what your dad had got himself involved in.
Yes, and I had a really, really odd conversation with him one afternoon when I just asked him to be honest with me and say, look, what have you been doing? And he didn't really want to tell me. He was all very bravado, but he was in his late 60s, and the tactics of big corporates when they want to make an example of you involves a really high-profile lawyers practice. I won't name them. And they had interview officers from ex-flying squad who were taking him to London at 10 o'clock at night to interview him, to put him under duress. Hey, don't get me wrong. He's in a situation. He's done something wrong. He's created the situation. They strangled him of money for legal bills, of which he had to borrow money and whatever else. They then relieved him of every penny he had, of which probably he thought it was over. And then Trading Standards got involved, which I've learnt now. Trading Standards have more powers than a lot of the police. And they started a legal campaign with him, of which ended up in court. And I went to Dorchester Court one afternoon when he was early 70s. The stress had made him super ill. He had cancer. And he stood there, and I watched him. The judge say to him, I sentence you to 18 months. His partner had just got 18 months. And it was tear-jerking to me, to be honest. And then luckily they suspended it and tagged him.
Right.
So a man of 71 years of age, worked all his life, was tagged, and he did 18 months with a tag on. And what that taught me was that always get involved with legal entities. Yeah. And a massive thing for me was, if you're going to do anything, do it properly.
Yeah, do proper business in a proper way.
In a proper way. And that was really, really key for me. And it killed my father in the end. So he passed away from cancer, which I'm 90% sure was brought on by stress.
There's a lot to say. Cancer is caused by trauma and stress.
Trauma and stress.
One of the signs of indicative that can lead to it, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. And that was a really valuable lesson for me. And if anybody ever says to me now, oh, we can do this, and I go, look, if it's not proper and it's not correct, I'm not getting remotely interested.
Yeah. Lesson for us all, isn't it, how it can go wrong. And as we start to wind up the podcast, one of the things that I do admire about you is that you are always on the front foot and you're always trying to improve. There's a big piece out there, isn't it, on all those Instagram channels about personal growth and personal development and looking after yourself. But you seem to have a really strong kind of adage of look after yourself, grow as an individual. I mean, how do you go about doing that? Where does that come from? Any hints and tips for our listeners?
I'm growing every day, Warren. Are you growing every day? Do you learn something new every day?
Absolutely.
Someone said that to me. You learn something new every day. I genuinely do. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Yeah. And what I'm trying to do is filter out the bad bits. Yeah. So that as I get older, then I become a lot more of a balanced individual. Yeah. And I think that comes with, I'm trying to be more patient. And as you get older, you become less patient. And that's a great trait to have, is be patient and be a really good listener. Yeah. So if I have a conversation with someone now, I spend a lot more time listening to what they're telling me. Yeah. Whereas when I was younger...
that salesman probably didn't listen quite
He didn't listen at all. I was just interested in getting my point across for my own device. Yeah. So going back to that, I just really do want to become a more balanced person, become, a good listener and a sounding board, really.
Brilliant. Fantastic. I'm going to end with some quick fire questions.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Morning person or night owl?
Oh, I'm not a night owl anymore. I'm an early morning man.
Early morning, get up, get the day underway. One word that describes your leadership style?
Poor.
What still keeps you awake at night?
No, it's a really, really good question. And I don't think I can quick fire answer that.
No, that's fine. Think about it.
That is a really, really good question. A lot of things that do keep me up at night, I shouldn't really be worrying about.
Right.
But because I have a worrying nature, and a lot of it used to be about money.
Yeah.
Now, perhaps not about money. It's perhaps what I've done in the day. Has some of it been right?
Okay.
As far as how I've dealt with things, how we've interacted with people.
Okay. One thing in life you couldn't do without?
Ooh. Used to be press-ups, but I've just torn my rotator cuff, so I'm doing without them at the moment.
Okay.
One thing I could do, my wife. Is that a good answer?
That's a perfect answer. I was hoping you might answer that for your own relationship. I was hoping we might get that. She's clearly been really, you've alluded to her quite, she's really been important to you in this journey, hasn't she?
God, Jesus. I'll tell you what, how she puts up with me, who knows?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, everybody's got a good wife behind them, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly have. Favourite way to unwind after a long day?
10 years ago, I'd said a glass of wine. I'm sort of steering away from drink. And don't get me wrong, I like socialising and going to a bar and whatever else. But for me now, a lot of the time I just sit and think of my own thoughts. And that sounds really sad and boring. But I have half an hour when I get home is where I detox my mind, where I just try and think about nothing. Yeah. So that I can start the part of the evening off without having any work thoughts in my head.
Brilliant. Solace is a great thing, actually, isn't it?
Solace, that's the word I was looking for.
No, definitely. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because that reflects what I was just saying about you and the need and desire to have personal growth and understand yourself better.
Yeah, for sure.
So you'll be relieved to know this is my final question, okay? So what's your definition of personal success? It's the question we always finish the podcast with. So.
10 years ago, I said to you wealth.
Yeah.
And that, I think inner happiness, and I think having in your own mind, being able to go home and literally think about nothing but there's no dwelling over anything. I think you just need a clear head to be able to end up in situations where you don't have to think.
Brilliant.
That's a waffly old answer, isn't it?
No, it's a good answer. I like that. And if people do want to reach out to you, make contact with you, find out more about what Jade Aden Interiors do and what they could do for them, where can they go?
Like a new office, we're more than happy to help you. We're online, Jade Aden Interiors. We've got a great website, or we have an office in Ringwood, 01425 689 199.
Perfect. Look at that. Paul, I said right at the start, I have wanted you as a guest on this podcast for so long. You haven't let me down. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for being so honest, so raw, and being so candid in the way in which we've been able to have this conversation.
I'm humbled, Warren. You're a nice fella.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I think I'm quite humbled by that conversation. I said at the start I've wanted Paul on the podcast for so long. He certainly didn't let us down, did he? In the way in which he was very humble in sharing his story. He was very honest in the way in which he enjoys running a business, being in business, but also those dramatic lessons learned he shared in such a candid and honest way that there is something for us all to take away from that conversation. And I hope you, the listener, are able to do that and can reflect on the conversation. It's been one of my favourite conversations I've ever had on the Evolve to Succeed podcast. And again, please, I do hope you enjoy the podcast. Do rate, review, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.